Welcome to the Midlife Midsters Podcast, your podcast for inspiration on being bold and saying yes to making the most of midlife.
We are so pleased to be here today with Martha Enthoven, a life coach. So before we begin, let's do some introductions. I'm Marla.
I'm Carmen.
I'm Marianne.
I'm Michelle.
And I'm Martha.
And I'm Leslie Ann.
So Martha, thank you so much for joining us today. We are really excited to talk with you about life coaching. So if you could start just by letting us know kind of why life coaching, how did you start, when did you start, and what kind of people in midlife are you working with?
Well, it's a fun story how I found life coaching. I had heard of life coaches, but it was in 2010 when my husband's firm actually hired a team of coaches to come in and help him and some other directors on some projects. So I was interviewed by a life coach as part of my husband's 360, and it just seemed so interesting. So I talked to the firm that group was from. I met with the life coach for about 6 sessions. It was incredible. And then my husband, as a gift, gave me, kind of the tuition to go to the school where all of these coaches had been trained. And he was really impressed with them. So we chose that program. So I've loved it. So I've been doing it for 12 years now. And I think it's an incredible profession of just drawing people out and helping them become who they really want to be.
What was your career before that?
Well, my way background is I went to the School of Foreign Service, and we talked a little bit about dreams that we may have had to give up. Early on, I loved travel. I have a lot of the Enneagram 7 in me, so I thought I might go into the Foreign Service. But lo and behold, I met my husband junior year and really made it a careful decision about that. But I just realized the biggest things that were important to me really were, family and being with this man who had like such integrity and character. And it just, how people pull off that Foreign Service life just started to seem too hard as I got to know it better. So I was really interested in foreign relations and took a job with a Swedish company and worked for them full-time before having kids and then part-time. Then by the time I'd had my third child, we were living overseas in Malaysia. So I wasn't working then. And then I always was doing kind of interesting little projects, but the life coaching became, I put a lot more time and effort into it.
That's cool.
So Martha, what do you like most about coaching midlife women?
I love coaching women in midlife. I'm passionate about this work. I feel like it is a time, honestly, that women become free. They can become who they truly were meant to be. There's so many things earlier in life that we take on that are wonderful things, but somewhat, culturally encouraged upon us. Marriage, motherhood, career, homemaking. And those things are great. I wouldn't have skipped any of them. But in midlife, you can just take off the shackles. You've done all that. What am I going to do now? So I love seeing just kind of growth and excitement in women in middle age.
I have a question. Do you find that when women are in midlife, do they, and I'm kind of using this for me in a way, do they resemble how they were as a child? Like the things that they enjoy, do they tune into that adventurous spirit or the things they enjoyed and did? Does it pop back up later?
I think it does. It's such a fun question because a lot of times if someone's feeling really stuck and people come to me because they're feeling stuck, and maybe they feel they're not having enough fun or joy in their life. They sort of have lost that through all these years of hard work and everything. That is one of the things that I will have such a wonderful time doing with the client, even so much as looking at old photo albums of them when they were a kid to help reconnect, looking at yearbooks, something that often clients sort of come up with their own homework when they're with me, but then I solidify it by saying, okay, are you going to really do that? But often what people will do is get in touch with people they knew when they were younger and have lost touch with. And these relationships getting sparked again in your 50s when you hadn't talked to that person in 25 years, really fun.
It is fun.
Yeah.
So you mentioned, and I think it makes a lot of sense, that most clients come to you when they're stuck. And so midlife, as you said, it can be a freeing time, but there also can be challenges. Can you talk a little bit about some of the common challenges you see midlife women facing?
Yes. I'll tell you, a lot of the people that I work with come to me for issues that I myself had to solve, and I feel I did a really good job solving them. And so my circle saw that and kind of word of mouth spread. So those issues, one is in my 40s, I had slowly gained quite a bit of weight. Basically, I was using food to distract myself, to, kind of buffer from life in some ways. And then also my marriage, I was not, I had just spent way too much time being, just not finding satisfaction and peace with my husband. So in my midlife, I realized I really needed to change those two things and created a program called Mindful Eating, which I just love. It's really awareness around food. It's a whole different way to kind of think about how we eat. And then with my relationship, I just realized I was going to control everything I could, which is my thoughts about the relationship. And within a year, I was just feeling so much more positive and appreciative of my husband, which we really needed. So those are things I help women with. I have a lot of clients who are dealing with how they're going to eat and drink alcohol in midlife, and then relationships, either with a partner, their parents, children, siblings, but women in our midlife, we finally have time to work on relationships. And if there's an uncomfortable relationship, women often want to finally resolve it, do the work to figure out how to make it better.
So I have a question for you. With this notion of people getting stuck and then being able to get unstuck, do most of your clients, are they people who have means, who can put time and attention and energy to this? Because what I'm wondering is what advice you might have for someone who, they're struggling with so many different things that even at midlife, maybe they don't have the finances to invest in a life coach or to take courses that might enrich them or to look into marital counseling. Do you run across that at all? And what do you do? How do you counsel a person like that?
So I definitely do. I do a couple things. One is I have a sliding scale, and I will pull that out if I can tell that it would be helpful. And so I've often done that in the past. But I also have a number of podcasts that are put on by life coaches that I think can be really helpful. And that's a way to help someone for free, listening to that. So I think people can make the time. It's almost just a shift in realizing you want to make a change.
So the reason I was asking that, and maybe when we're done, you can, at the end of the episode, you can suggest some podcasts for folks. But the reason that I was asking that goes to, you had shared with us beforehand some thoughts about things that we might want to ask you about. And one of the observations you had to do with people's mindset, and that sometimes being able to move forward is really a question of your mindset. And I tend to agree with you. People who have sort of long-term inability to make changes may be stuck because they're in their head too much. But I also think sometimes it can be a barrier to entry, can be financial.
Yes. Yeah.
Do you find that, setting aside the financial piece, that sometimes it really is in someone's head?
Yes. Though I would say that when people come to me, they are ready. I mean, they're seeking me out because they want to do the scary things and change. But I agree with you. I mean, I know people that don't come to me that seem very stuck and are just, they want to stay in a stuck position.
Martha, when somebody does get stuck like that, when they stay in that, do you see that it ends up basically transitioning it to a depression or deep depression? It just gets harder and harder for them. I mean, how do they get unstuck without seeking help or changing that mindset?
I don't know. I guess I haven't seen them go really towards depression. But it can be frustrating for others to be with people who are kind of stuck.
Do you have tips for us or our listeners, kind of when you're at that point, maybe starting to recognize that you need to sort of make that jump, whether it's I'm ready to talk to a life coach, or maybe you just need to start talking to your friends. But what are some tips that you could give to your clients or to our listeners to help kind of jumpstart that unsticking process, if you will?
Right.
Getting that cover with the lid off the jar.
Yes. No, I say to clients, an analogy is often, it's like none of us want to look under the covers and see what's there. It reminds me of, a little kid at night quaking in their bed. They're terrified of a monster, but they're too scared to look under the bed. And then they would see there isn't the monster. So a life coach kind of, holds hands with the client, and we both get the bravery together to look under the cover, look under the bed. So I do think it's sort of a courageous leap to really figure out what you need, and to pursue that doggedly. I mean, that's another wonderful thing about a life coach, is what you're really doing is committing to yourself to show up. I often say to people, let's at least commit to 6 sessions, because then you have to keep coming, and you'll find you don't want to. I have a coach and I don't want to show up either. I don't want to look under the bed, or certainly don't want to reveal, what's under the bed. But because I have to do it, I've set mine up every other week. I have to keep doing the work.
So you mentioned courageous leap. That really caught my attention. So can you describe maybe some of the courageous leaps you've seen women in midlife take?
Yes. One of my favorite ones, and I think this one sticks with me because she exhibited courage that I would like to have in my own life. But this was a woman who she wanted to travel. She had recently been divorced. She tried traveling with friends, and for various reasons that didn't really work out. And so after lots of exploring with me, she came to the realization that she had to get really comfortable with solo travel. And so she started off with easy cities in America, and then 1 or 2 easy cities in Europe. And then last fall, she went off with a backpack and a 6-week Europass, and was doing this inexpensively, going to hostels and things. She met so many people. She was so brave. I am myself not quite brave enough to be just like in Hungary by myself and my backpack and using buses. And so that was an amazing story. And what it did is it gave her a new lease on life, because it was a new reason to really invest in her career. She wanted to make money for her adventures. And it was a new reason to get fit and stay fit, because if you're moving around all that, you need to, be strong. And it also gave her such a great thing to do at night after work. She suddenly got so interested in researching for her next trip and just immersing herself in whatever that was going to be.
What a boost in self-confidence that would give you.
It totally transformed her. A really fun thing before she went on her Eurail pass is she and I watched the movie Breaking Away together. And I don't know if any of you remember that. It was sort of a late 70s movie, but it's about really resilience in the face of pain and disillusionment. And kind of this adventure and idea of immersing yourself in another culture. So we watched that, and she just, she was realized how strong and resilient she was.
Bold.
Yeah, totally bold, and saying yes to a way of life she never thought she would have done.
I love that.
And I have a question for you. How do you, when somebody comes to you, why would they pick a life coach instead of a psychotherapist? How do you think about that?
I think it's a really interesting question. I talk people through that a lot. Clients, and that I work with teens as well. So parents are often trying to figure that out. So I think the differences are just quickly, we'll touch base on training. I would say focus on what the different ones are looking at. And how they kind of how you view the client, and also just how you would meet. Wait, let me think of what the right word is.
Or would it be also like they don't have a mental health aspect to it? They're mainly stuck and trying to find themselves versus dealing with something that might be more of a mental health, like depression or anxiety.
Exactly. So it's kind of, there's a medical group, which would be the therapist, psychiatrist, psychologist, who are looking at it as a medical diagnosis, versus a life coach who the person feels healthy, but they want to up-level their life. I would say a comparison would be, if you break your arm, you're going to go see an orthopedist. If you want to up your tennis game, you are going to get a tennis coach.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So it's like that. I think another interesting thing is focus. I find the medical group tends to focus on the past, what's been happening. And in my work as a life coach, we're really future oriented. We are goals oriented. Well, how one will run their appointments. I think in the medical group, they're somewhat stuck for various reasons. They just have to do kind of the 45-minute session in person or on Zoom now, which is lucky. Whereas as a life coach, there's so much freedom in how I work with people, how long we need to talk. One thing I have started doing in the last few years is I meet clients for walks. That was super helpful in the mindful eating program. That became really helpful. Working with someone who was really depressed, it turned out to be really helpful. And then during the shutdown of our schools in California for COVID, I began working with a lot of teens and taking them on hikes. And it was such a different experience than working, sitting in a room, looking at a therapist, an adult.
Yeah, you get that side-by-side thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool.
The side-by-side walk with teens is wonderful. I have taken a course on movement therapy, and it's helped me to see that movement is huge on emotional release. So even if I am doing a Zoom call with someone, sometimes I'll have them put their favorite rock song on, and we will stand up, I will as well, and we just move it and shake it and really try to loosen up if I feel that, something just isn't coming. And then it's amazing sometimes the wisdom that will just suddenly reveal itself when the client sits down again. So I find that on my walks. A lot of time, movement and kind of just being with the sky and trees helps people evolve forward more so than being trapped in a room.
That's very interesting. Thanks.
So Martha, Back in the day, I guess it was, I would say, maybe the 70s, they used to talk about midlife crisis. So I remember my parents talking about some friend of theirs who had a midlife crisis. He got a motorcycle or a sports car or left his wife and family for a younger woman. And now I think maybe we are thinking about midlife as an opportunity and an opportunity for growth. Is that something that you see with the clients that you're meeting with?
Yes. I mean, I absolutely agree with you. It is the time for growth. It's really a time for rebirth. I often will chuckle with clients when we talk about, a midlife crisis. And I say to people, I think we need to change the language on that. Let's call it midlife catharsis. So I even have my little Google definition of catharsis, the process of releasing and thereby providing relief from strong or repressed emotions. What a beautiful thing to do in our midlife. Give ourselves permission to release all the things that we don't need to carry anymore. And that gives us time and room for what we actually want.
That actually resonates with me, and I'm curious to how you would react to this. I at one point had a job where I worked a lot, and I had like 300 emails a day that I had to go through. And then I switched jobs, and in my new job, I had like 3 emails a day, and it was unsettling, and I didn't know what to do, and I felt a little bit like, what's the expression? A swan swims on the surface, but their legs are paddling crazy underneath, because I didn't know what to do with my time. And so for women in midlife, we started with, you've been raising a family, you've been working, you've been running the house, doing all the things we women do. And now you have this point where you have time. Do you find that leaves some of your clients in a sort of a frantic state? And if so, what do you tell them to get them to make that adjustment?
Absolutely. I do a lot of work with people, exactly that, where their job has shifted, be it mothering or even retiring in their 60s. And so what I work on with clients is they've got to figure out what will bring them meaning and structure in their lives. And we work on that together. And it can be hard work, but if you're working with someone, a neutral observer who will walk the walk with you, it's just so much easier because you have to keep showing up, you have to keep walking the walk, and eventually you get there. But it takes time. But I would say it's finding new meaning and structure.
I have a follow-up to that. I am 4 weeks an empty nester, so all of a sudden have a lot more time than I used to. I also have always worked a lot, and so I find myself filling a lot of that time with work because that's what I'm used to. How do you advise women or your coach? I know you have some men. How do you advise them to not just fill their time with work? How do you find the things that you actually enjoy? Because being a wife and a mom and working a lot, it was like, I didn't really have a lot of time to do what I enjoyed. So I almost like, I don't know what I like.
Yeah.
How do you help them figure that out?
So, I mean, the first thing that we talk about is, are you using your work as a means of buffering? Are you just using it so you don't have to think, so that you don't have to go deeper, so that you don't have to sit bored on the couch, which it may require. So it's kind of, I think it gets to be a personal decision. Where do you want to cut that off? I do think people can use their work to buffer.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, sometimes what I'll do to buffer is just sort of putter around cleaning my house. And then I catch myself, oh my gosh, I'm doing that again. What am I avoiding? And so I would say with someone in that position, again, how working with a coach helps is it can be uncomfortable. You don't want to figure out. It's easier to just work. But if you weren't working, what would you find that might create more meaning, or also a different way to give your gifts to the planet?
Mm-hmm. That's good advice. Thank you.
Oh, I love that. Thinking about how to give your gifts to the planet. I don't have a question. I'm just going to take a moment to think about what my gifts are and how I give them to the planet. That's amazing.
Well, and this is actually something I talk to all my clients about, all my different core beliefs. But this is a belief I strongly hold. The only way the world can be the best that it can be is if all of us humans commit to growing and evolving and actually being our best and putting our gifts out there. I believe each of us is born with certain things the planet really needs. Even just be it, are you the friendly person in the neighborhood that's, nice to children and visits with the elderly and picks up trash when you're walking your dog? I mean, there's so many different ways of gifts. I'm not saying they all have to, be huge things, but just that you are contributing, you're bringing your kindness and goodness to the world. So that is one of the things that I love to work with on people. What do they want to bring?
That makes me think of Marianne's question about when we're girls, because I think
Yeah.
some of those dreams we had were very precious and very innate to who we are and the role we're supposed to play.
Talking about childhood makes me think of something else that you had sort of shared with us beforehand. I know when I was a child, I was bored a lot. And I actually used to lie in the grass and just kind of stare up at the sky because I didn't have anything else to do. But, we lived in a different time.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
There was a lot of downtime. There were only 3 channels on TV. I tell my kids that. They cannot believe that. There were only 3 channels on TV. And
you had to get up to change them.
Yeah. Yes.
Exactly. Right. Okay. 4 channels. And we didn't have technology. And so boredom was kind of a way of life, but we don't do that anymore. I think people avoid boredom at all costs. And I wonder if that has a cost.
It does. I mean, just in my own life, I realized that boredom is one of the biggest things that I was trying to avoid. So I would buffer in ways to not be bored. Eating, drinking white wine, cleaning my house, organizing things, so many different ways. I realized I just had to take on that emotion, feel the feeling of boredom. So I do say that to clients, that feelings are just vibrations in our body. They can't kill you. They can feel uncomfortable, but you can feel them.
And what's the benefit from letting yourself feel boredom?
Because once you for me, if I sit on the couch and say, okay, bring it on, I'm not going to drink white wine, I'm going to just feel bored, my brain becomes really interested in what feeling bored is like. And that opens up a whole new world. I think you it's almost like busting through to the other side. If you allow yourself to really feel uncomfortable feelings, there's truth on the other side.
I'm really struck by that. I have a friend who did a work exercise and they had to write what their strengths were. And she said one of her strengths was rest. So a different approach to sitting on the couch and feeling bored, but sitting on the couch and just being.
Yes.
Resting.
Which is productive. You are actually resting.
And I think I try to frame it a little bit myself, or reframe it with allowing myself, particularly as somebody whose personality type is to keep moving forward and not to stay in those spaces, to allow myself the time to stay in those spaces. And even, we stopped reading books sitting on the couch, right? We had to read a book on the treadmill.
Yeah.
And it's okay to read a book on the couch, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
yes.
So, where are we in terms of what you were saying, allowing ourselves to sort of have that full spectrum of feelings as part of our entire growth principles, if you will.
Right. And it's another beautiful thing of middle age is we all get braver at allowing ourselves to do things that we actually want to do.
For example, listening to a podcast.
What else have you learned from your clients? What have they taught you?
I have to say, every single person I work with, I feel like I come away wiser because we dig down through all the different layers that they have for them to unearth their wisdom. And I always take away nuggets from that. But one of the ones that sticks out, which really led to my midlife catharsis, was a woman that I was working with many years ago, 7 years ago. And she was in midlife. She had done very well in her career. She had, wonderful husband, healthy children, gorgeous home. And she was not happy. She was reaching out to me because she wasn't happy. And working with her really brought home to me the realization that circumstances don't create our happiness or unhappiness. That's an idea that was talked about a lot at one of the life coach schools I went to. It's called The Life Coach School by Brooke Castillo. And she calls that idea the model, that circumstances don't create our happiness. It's our thoughts about our circumstances. But when she was teaching that, I got it theoretically, but I didn't really feel it in my bones until I was with someone who I looked at her circumstances like, come on. But she wasn't happy. And that really made me go deep in myself. Gosh, what are all my thoughts? I feel like our thoughts create our results. And that led me to look at some of the results that I had created in my life, which was that I was not very healthy as far as my food and eating, and then not having the marriage that I wanted. So that person really helped me come to face my own demons and work through them.
Martha, you talked about your thoughts and stepping back and thinking about that. I came across a term recently called metacognition, where it's where you study the thoughts of your thoughts, like why you do that. And it allows to put distance between it. And it takes you further away from that bad thought or the thought that you're trying to figure out. Do you know a little bit about metacognition?
Yes.
You've heard of that term. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Absolutely. So I use that a lot in the mindful eating when I work with clients. So in mind, it's sometimes good to have an example that we can all think of. So if a client is sitting there and they really want to eat the cupcake and they are just filled with that desire for the cupcake, all you're feeling is the desire. But what I teach them is to observe themselves desiring the cupcake. And what that does is it just creates that just a little space between the desire and your experience. And that little bit of room of just observing yourself. And then I teach people to do it with a lot of love and humor. It gives you a little bit of space to create a different result.
Right. No, I was reading about it. I want to read more about it. I found it very interesting.
So, Martha, when you're talking about sort of the difference between circumstances and thoughts, right? What could you offer to someone who really does have difficult circumstances that impede their ability to have a fulfilling midlife? So someone who's got financial restrictions, or someone who, their home life is just so challenging that they can't invest in the sort of time and energy it takes to do either therapy or life coaching. What's available for them?
So I absolutely believe there are many circumstances, that a human can and should change. So it's not accepting, I'm trying to think how to describe that. It's not accepting the circumstances for good or, for long term. But what I do think the first step is you have to accept where you are without a lot of anger and resistance. I mean, really, I bring clients to neutral about their circumstances, because if you've got anger and resistance while you're trying to create the change, it is just so much harder. I don't totally understand it, but I just see it in people. It holds them back. It is like going on a hike with a 500-pound weight around you. But if you come to neutral about the circumstance, this is what it is. this job is really difficult, or I don't have the money. I mean, I wouldn't even say the job is difficult, because you really have to just, the circumstance is the job. What am I going to think about it? The circumstance is the partner. What am I going to think about it? And there's thousands of thoughts that you can choose. And so it's just sort of shifting the spotlight towards the thoughts that are going to serve you. And that will, in the end, kind of free you to move forward and actually create circumstances that are better for you.
So we talked earlier about mindset, and it seems like that's what we're getting back to. So if somebody like Leslie Ann had mentioned, if they don't have the funds to be able to have a life coach, as far as them studying and thinking about mindset changes, positive thinking, meditation, getting out of their own head and getting in nature, what advice would you give to people, and how can they follow that where it's actually efficient for them, it works for them, and they can see the results without having a life coach?
Well, one thing I say to people is put together some just small, easy daily goals that will move you forward. And there's been a lot of studies, everyone's heard of them, but things you can add to your life. One is just a little bit of exercise, a little bit of forward motion. Another thing I tell people is practice quieting your mind, even just for 3 minutes a day. Set the timer on your phone for 3 minutes, and you don't have to be in lotus position on the floor. You can be in a chair, but just calming and emptying your mind. And I do that on the phone with people frequently, just on kind of informational interview calls. I'll just train someone to do that if it seems like they won't be able to afford the fees. That can be amazing. What those 3 minutes of emptiness does over time is teaches you to come to neutral, what neutral feels like.
Feels like they have no thoughts in there. I'm sorry.
It's like medicine.
I can't imagine not having
I know. It's literally emptying your mind.
Okay.
So that your mind is just quiet. I mean, you will only experience it for milliseconds because our brains are constantly sending new thoughts your way. But if you do it, you guys try it out. How can you say no that for 7 days, I'm going to find 3 minutes? It could be in my car. And I can do the little training with you. I'll send you another voice recording of the recording.
It's like meditation then?
Yes, similar to meditation.
Okay.
And it is just just this emptying of your mind where thoughts will come through. And I say to people, just imagine it. It's like a cloud, and you're just blowing that away. And you'll just have milliseconds of an empty mind. But I think, and actually there have been so many studies of this, like looking at the minds of monks who meditate so much. Yeah. Their brains fire up completely differently than our busy, overstressed brains.
So where can people find you, Martha Enthoven, life coach?
Come to my website. It's marthaenthoven.com. Martha, and then Enthoven is ENTHOVEN.com. I tell people it's like Beethoven, but it's Enthoven.
And Martha, for folks who can't afford a life coach, can you offer them any alternative way to get some kind of guidance about midlife issues?
One of the podcasts that I absolutely love is put out by the program where I've done a lot of my training. It's called the Life Coach School. So if they look up the lifecoachschool.com, under there you can click on podcast. I would start with episode 1. They are phenomenal.
Oh, yeah. So Martha, wow, we could go on talking to you for hours. This has really been so fascinating, and it has been fantastic talking with you. And to our listeners, visit us online at AmericanMidsters.com, and we will be sure to add resources to help anybody who's thinking about being bold and making the most of what midlife has to offer.